Timothy Sergeyevich left his wife, and since he was a conscientious man, trying to justify and explain his act. Nadia, understand me, forgive me. You are a good woman, one might say wonderful. We have lived a long life together, raised a son. But with her, I feel alive again, both in soul and body. Fate has given me a gift, and I cannot reject it so easily. Nadezhda Vasilievna, with tears in her eyes, looked at her inspired husband. Timochka, how can this be, and what about your stomach? She's just a young girl. Will she cook porridge and take care of your health? Timothy Sergeyevich began to get irritated. Nadia, what porridge, what porridge? With her, I also become young, energetic. She is like a light at the end of the tunnel for me. I forget about my stomach, about porridge, about everything. Can I reject this renewal? Can I? His wife started crying and through her tears said, "At least take warm socks and slippers, slippers." Timothy Sergeyevich looked at Nadezhda hopelessly. Nadia, your husband is leaving you, and you are talking about slippers. You can't dissolve completely into a man like this. You are like Chekhov's Dashechka. Calm down, everything will be fine. Nadezhda Vasilievna sobbed childishly and said nothing in response. Her husband took advantage of the pause in their conversation and quickly left the door. Nadezhda sobbed a few more times and said in a confused voice, looking at the slammed door, "Timochka didn't take the slippers." Valya Kashina was a good girl and didn't even imagine that she could inflict a soul wound on someone. She really liked the fit and tall Timothy Sergeyevich, a 52-year-old man with a straight Greek profile and thick hair slightly touched by gray. She studied at a pedagogical university and lived in a dormitory. He worked there as a teacher and taught them the history of foreign literature, specializing in ancient literature. He was talented and eloquent. Girls periodically fell in love with him, but the teacher was reserved and friendly with everyone. Valya sincerely admired the erudite teacher. She sat in the front row in his classes and never took her shiny, admiring eyes off the man. He also noticed the beautiful student, always greeted her in the corridor, checked all her work on time, and helped her with her term paper. Valya did nothing deliberately, had no ulterior motives, and brushed off all the hints from her friends that the teacher had a crush on her, saying that such an interesting person couldn't be attracted to a simple provincial student like her, which she sincerely believed herself to be. And she was so wrong because despite Valya's limited knowledge, Timothy Sergeyevich liked her more and more, especially her slim legs and firm hips. Her gray eyes shone, her pink lips smiled. She was young, energetic, healthy, and therefore quite content with life. The teacher increasingly wanted to kiss Valya's lips instead of telling stories about ancient gods and heroes, and to run his hand along her firm, smooth leg. And other fantasies of this kind more and more often came to his mind. Finally, the very cause of these thoughts noticed Timothy Sergeyevich's quickened breath when he stood next to her. With all the sincerity and simplicity of youth, she smiled at the man, and he invited the young student to improve her cultural level by going to some exhibition. They began to visit exhibitions, museums, and vernissages. Once Timothy Sergeyevich gathered the courage, and they visited the apartment of his friend and colleague, Lev Viktorovich, while he was at his dacha. There Valya gave herself to her wise mentor with all the fervor of youth and spontaneity. This happiness made the mature man lose his mind. He left his wife and rented an apartment for himself and his young nymph. Timothy Sergeyevich's wife, Nadezhda Vasilievna, was absolutely, simply not a modern woman, naturally affectionate, kind, and caring. First of all, she always thought not about herself, but about her husband and son. Nadezhda made no effort. She was proud of her boys, admired them. It was quite natural for her to do everything she could for them. She made oatmeal porridge for her husband every morning because she knew about his sick stomach. Her son loved cottage cheese casserole, and she didn't mind baking it. She carefully chose products in the store, reading what the sausage was made of. She closely monitored the freshness of the milk and sour cream. She washed and ironed their clothes. Nadezhda literally bloomed when she saw her men cheerful, healthy, doing their own thing, and even liked by other women. For this attitude to life, Nadia's friends called her Hen, a narrow-minded and unintelligent woman. She didn't argue, continuing to do what she loved and knew how to do best, take care of her loved ones. Her son grew up, graduated, got a job, met a girl, fell in love, and moved in with her. He didn't call his mother often, visiting about once every 2 weeks. Her husband lost his mind over a young student and moved to a rented apartment. Now that there was no one to care for, Nadezhda Vasilievna slowly withered. She worked from home, writing and editing articles for a literary magazine. She stayed alone in the apartment and constantly thought about why she should live now. She tried to live for herself, bought new things, walked in the park in the mornings, even planned to go on vacation to another country, but noticed that none of this made her happy or brought inner satisfaction. One day she noticed a mangy mongrel puppy near the trash, which someone had thrown away. Without thinking long, she brought this flea-infested treasure home, washed it, and the next day took it to the vet. At the clinic, they examined it and said the puppy was severely emaciated, but otherwise healthy. They recommended feeding it a little and bringing it back for vaccinations later. Nadezhda took him back home, named him Darek, and began to care for him. Sad thoughts gradually began to leave, as Darek, like no one else, managed to help Nadezhda Vasilievna find a new purpose in life. He put on weight, started running around the apartment, yapping, and knowing everything in sight. Slippers, shoes, the wooden legs of stools, and the belt her husband had forgotten. The dog turned out to be cheerful, cunning, and completely untrained. While she was teaching him good manners, he managed to tear apart a couple of pillows and soil the couch. Nadezhda Vasilievna had a noble goal, to turn this animal into a protector and guardian. The goal was noble but challenging. At least she didn't feel lonely walking in the park, and she had bought the sports suit, sweater, and jeans not just for nothing, but so that the unruly Darek wouldn't dirty her good clothes by jumping on her in any weather. One evening while walking, she heard someone call her. She turned her head and saw her husband's colleague, Lev Viktorovich. The man approached her and greeted her. Darek ran up to him and was about to raise a paw on Lev's trousers, but Nadezhda scolded the dog. "I'll teach you. Get away quickly." The dog ran off. The man asked, "Decided to get a dog?" She replied, "I picked up a treasure. He turned out to be untrained. It's terrible. Now we go for walks. It got boring at home. My son lives with his girlfriend. My husband..." She paused and looked questioningly at her companion. "You probably heard." Lev Viktorovich silently nodded. She hesitated, then decided to ask, "Do you know how he is?" Lev Viktorovich looked at her carefully, answering restrainedly, "I don't know. At work, everything seems to be fine with him." The woman lowered her head to hide the tears that appeared in her eyes. She turned away, took out a handkerchief. Lev Viktorovich said, "Nadezhda Vasilievna, I wanted to ask you, could you help me choose a suit, as there is no one else to turn to? My daughter's wedding is soon. My wife, passed away." Nadezhda Vasilievna calmed down, thought for a while. "I'll help. Let's go on Saturday. I need to finish some work." Darek ran up to her. She put the leash on him, said goodbye to Lev Viktorovich, and went home, while he stood for a while and watched her go. Timofey Sergeyevich was completely happy with his young girlfriend at first. He called himself Prometheus, not chained to a rock. but to her, to Valia. And he was not far from the truth, because her culinary experiments often gave him liver pain. Valia sincerely admired the erudition of her experienced friend and looked up to him. In love, she was generous and seductive with her youth and beauty. She often woke him up at night, as her young body demanded much more effort and attention than an elderly man could give. She expressed her amorous enthusiasm loudly, and sometimes the neighbors knocked on the wall. After a stormy night, she was fresh as a rose in the morning, and cheerfully singing, made him and herself scrambled eggs with sausage, cut a cucumber, salad, and generously poured mayonnaise over it all. In winter, she asked him to go ice skating with her, and at night she sometimes wanted romance, suggesting they walk around nighttime Moscow to feel and understand, as she said, the spirit of the city. She called her lover Tim or Timas. After 6 months of renewal and romance, Timas noticed that his stomach began to hurt, and from constant lack of sleep, he developed a nervous tic in his left eye. One day, an elderly, spiteful old lady neighbor from below met him near the elevator and expressed a complaint. "You should teach your daughter to behave decently at night. She screams, moans, doesn't let decent people sleep. How can you tolerate such behavior? She brings home anyone, and you don't sleep at night." Timothy Sergeyevich irritably replied, "None of your business. She is of legal age, by the way." The old woman got into the elevator, saying as she left, "You look like a decent person, but you raised her, the elevator door closed behind her." Timothy Sergeyevich, in a bad mood, went to the institute. In the evening, when he returned home tired from work, cheerful Valyusha was cooking store-bought dumplings. Smiling joyfully, she came out to meet him and hung on his neck. "Tim, hi, I'm cooking dumplings." He grumbled gloomily. "Fine, dumplings then dumplings," and slowly began to undress. Seeing that he was upset about something, Valentina asked, "Tamas, what's the matter? Are you unhappy with me?" He didn't answer and went to the kitchen. The dumplings were already cooked. Valya laid them out on 2 plates and generously, as always, poured mayonnaise on top. After thinking for a while, she added ketchup to it. Timothy Sergeyevich pushed his plate aside, poured himself tea, and spread butter on a slice of white bread. Valyusha asked, "Aren't you going to eat dumplings? Can I eat your portion?" He nodded, took the cup of tea, and went to the room to prepare for his lectures. Satisfied and full, Valyusha soon followed him. She sat next to him, put her head on his shoulder, and her small hand began to unbutton his shirt. She asked, "We are so good together, right, Tim?" Timothy was silent because he had begun to seriously doubt it. By summer, Timothy Sergeyevich realized that he needed to save his life. By this time, he had lost weight, aged, and his hair had noticeably thinned. His mood often changed. He was cheerful one moment and irritably scolding someone for trifles the next. He started having conflicts with colleagues and students, which had never happened before. Finally, the students passed their credits and exams, and he went on vacation. By this time, Valya was planning to visit her relatives in another city. He said a touching farewell to her, gave her money, and said that his wife had fallen ill, and as a real man, he had to return and take care of a bedridden, neglected patient. Valentina appreciated his noble impulse, took the money, and left for her hometown to spend her holidays happily. By this time, the elderly lover had also tired her considerably. Timothy Sergeyevich paid the rent to the landlady, packed his things, and went home. When he got to his floor, he saw that during the time he was away, his wife had changed the door. He started ringing the bell. Soon, the key rattled in the lock, the door opened, and he saw Nadezhda Vasilyevna, and behind her, a fat dog, looking like a complete mongrel, flew out onto the landing and immediately loudly barked at Timothy Sergeyevich. Nadezhda, seeing her husband change beyond recognition, could only say, "Timochka, A male voice was heard from the apartment. "Nadia, who is it?" Neighbors came. A plump and satisfied Lev Viktorovich in a t-shirt and shorts appeared on the doorstep. The stunned husband asked, "What are you doing here?" Nadezhda Vasilievna had come to her senses by then and quickly said, come in, Timofey. We shouldn't be talking on the landing." He entered the hallway and put down his suitcase. Nadezhda Vasilievna began to explain, "Don't be angry, Timofey. Lev and I have been living together for half a year now. You left and Lev Viktorovich's wife died. You know, he needed my help. That's how it all happened. If you want, we can move to his place." She turned to Lev. "Can we?" Lev Viktorovich quickly agreed. "Of course, Nadyasha. Whenever you want, we'll move." Timofey Sergeyevich said nothing, waved his hand, took his suitcase, and dragged it to his room. For a whole month, Timofey Sergeyevich did nothing but sleep and eat. Seeing the state he was in, Nadezhda and Lev were in no hurry to leave. Nadezhda Vasilievna cooked for everyone and left food for Timofey. He took the plate and hid in his room. After a month, he felt a little better, and Lev Viktorovich said they would start preparing to move to his apartment. Before leaving, they visited Timofey Sergeyevich. Nadezhda said their son knew everything and would visit him occasionally. He would visit them too, since he had become friends with Lev and Darek. Then she said goodbye, wished Timochka all the best, and left. Lev Viktorovich lingered a little and said, "Well, you certainly messed up. Lost such a woman. Your wife is a gift." Timofey Sergeyevich responded irritably, "Just go away, Lev Viktorovich." Lev Viktorovich smirked and quickly went to catch up with his Nadyasha. Timofey heard him saying something to Nadia and calling Darek. The front door closed behind them, and the former husband was left alone in the apartment.